I called Lauren, my wife, into Ethan's room the second I found the shoebox with the cash tucked under a pile of comics. She came in slow, looked down at the bills, and shrugged like it was nothing. "It's his," she said, casual, and turned to leave. Her shoulders were tight, but she didn't meet my eyes. I stood there with the money in my hands, feeling like the floor had slipped away from under me. That night Ethan came home from wherever he was. He hung his jacket and moved like he was carrying sleep in his bones. Lauren closed the door behind him and without a word started counting the cash by the lamp while she thought I wasn't watching. When she reached the end she muttered, "Not enough." She said it so low my skin went cold. Then she looked up at Ethan with a kind of hunger in her face I had never seen before and said, "You know what happens if it's not enough." He just nodded like he'd heard that threat before and kept his head down. Next morning at the kitchen table, Lauren handed Ethan 2 little white tablets with his cereal while I poured coffee and tried to breathe normally. She watched him until he swallowed them like the act mattered more than breakfast. "What are those?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Supplements," she said like it should stop any questions. "They'll keep you going on the late shifts." She sounded rehearsed. He didn't argue. He ate like someone who had practiced swallowing fear. Then the phone rang. It was Ms. Martinez, Ethan's homeroom teacher. "Mr. Carter, Ethan has nodded off in class several times this week," she said. Her voice went small when she asked, "Is everything okay at home?" I told her I would look into it and felt the question land in my chest like a fist. I tried to bring it up to Lauren later while she was folding towels in the living room. Her back was to me and she barely looked over her shoulder. "Kids are tired, put him to bed earlier," she said. Her voice was too steady. When I said he was asleep by 8, she blinked and rage flickered across her face for a second, then she snapped, "Just drop it, Mark, please." Something inside me hardened and refused to drop it. I started watching them both more closely. Ethan's eyes had dark crescents under them, and he moved like he was carrying a weight too big for his years. His hands shook sometimes, and once when he reached for his juice his fingers missed and it spilled down his shirt. Lauren's hands trembled when she counted bills, but she hid it behind a measured calm. There were small lies that didn't add up, late-night text messages deleted from her phone, a PayPal receipt erased, a gas station with an odd number of receipts in a folder. I felt like I was reading a book with pages cut out. That night I couldn't sleep. I went through the family laptop while Lauren and Ethan slept. On Facebook buy and sell, listings marked sold stared back at me, Ethan's handheld, his bike, even the signed baseball from his 9th birthday. My stomach dropped and then surged with a heat I couldn't name. I clicked through messages and found quick cash replies, numbers of people who handed over bills in alleys or at dawn. I felt dizzy like I had been standing too fast. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark feeling smaller than I had in years. The next morning I tried to be calm and ask direct questions. "Who did you sell your stuff to?" I asked Ethan while he stared at his cereal bowl. He lifted his eyes for a second and then looked away. "It's fine," he said, and the words sounded like armor. Lauren stepped in like she had practiced the motion. "We're getting through a hard time," she said. "Don't make a bigger thing out of it." Her voice was brittle. I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, to grab the bills and shake her until she told me everything. But there was a bigger fear under my anger, that whatever she was hiding wouldn't stop with things and money. I knew then the worry wasn't just about stolen toys or a missing baseball. The way Lauren watched Ethan swallow those pills and the way she flinched when she thought I might see her counting money told me this had teeth. This was something that could break us if I didn't get a grip on it. And I promised myself right then I wouldn't let it slide. I would find out what those late shifts were, who was paying, and why a 13-year-old was taking pills before breakfast. I couldn't sleep that night, so I opened the family computer and went straight to the local marketplace, the place we'd sold a few things before. Listings marked sold stared back at me, Ethan's handheld console, his bike, even the signed baseball he'd loved since he was 9. Seeing those items gone made my chest tighten like someone had grabbed it. I clicked through the messages and saw quick meetups, cash exchanges, little notes that felt like fingerprints left where someone had been. In the morning, Ethan came to the table and tried to eat, but his lip was split and there were purple shadows under his collarbone. He moved slow, like every motion hurt. I set my coffee down and asked, calm at first then not, "Who did this to you?" He looked at me and his eyes were empty like he'd been hollowed out. He stammered, then dropped his juice and let it stain the tablecloth. Lauren jumped up as if the floor opened under them both, wrapped herself around him and kept repeating, 3 more months, just 3 months. I can't lose both of you." Her voice broke into something I kept hearing over and over in my head, terrified, pleading, and resigned all at once. I wanted to grab her and shake sense into her, but a part of me heard the fear inside her words and it stripped me of the immediate anger. I asked Ethan again, softer this time, "Who did this? Who's been taking your stuff?" He wouldn't look me in the face. He whispered something about the diner, about working late, about truckers who didn't understand boundaries. My stomach rolled. I felt like I had been carrying a small, bright thing and suddenly it was gone. At pickup that afternoon, Principal Green stopped me in the carpool line and pulled me aside like it was urgent. She put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "I know what's going on. Lauren's scared. If we push, she'll pull him out of school. You have to be careful." Her eyes flicked away and she added, "Sometimes it's safer for them if we make a plan behind closed doors." I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to tell her that my son had bruises and a split lip and that I wanted answers now, not behind closed doors. Instead, I felt the words stuck in my throat. I felt how big and messy this was, how a school, a parent, and a kid all fit into a knot I couldn't easily untie. Driving home, I watched Lauren through the rearview mirror. She sat with her hands clenched in her lap like she was holding something fragile or dangerous. When I asked her what the principal meant, she laughed, but it was sharp and small. "Green's trying to protect us," she said. "She knows we could fall apart." I told her the things I'd seen online and asked about the bruises. She collected herself like she'd practiced and said, "It's nothing, kids fight, he'll be fine." The lie was too thin to cover anything. Sorry for the quick interruption. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave comment below. It really helps the channel grow. Alright, let's jump back into the story. I pressed until she snapped and her voice rose so everyone in the car could feel it. "Mark, if you don't stop, I will leave. Do you understand me?" There was a threat in the room that wasn't directed at me but at a future where our family fell apart. Later, when the house was quiet and Ethan was in his room with his head down, I sat on the couch and let my thoughts spin. I tried to remember every small fracture that led to this moment. The missed medical appointments, the late bills, the call from HR about my insurance gap, the nights Lauren came home with pockets full of cash and excuses. The list read like a slow-motion collapse. I thought about how easy it had been for someone to tell a frightened mother that a few nights of work would fix everything, to hand over pills that kept a kid awake and moving like a machine. I started making calls. I called a friend who used to work in customer service at a local clinic and asked what services existed for families in trouble. I texted my brother who lives out of state and wrote the truth instead of the sugar-coated version I'd been giving him for months. "We need help," I typed. "I found sold listings for Ethan's stuff. He's got injuries. Lauren's scared." He answered within an hour, short and steady, "Come stay for a bit, get him out of there." The words felt like a rope thrown across a river. When night came and I sat outside Ethan's bedroom door listening to the house breathe, I made a plan I should have made earlier. I would find out who had him working late. I would ask Lauren every question until she had to tell me the whole thing or leave. If she wouldn't, I'd call the school, call whoever ran the diner, or call someone who could remove him from that place. I wanted the house to feel safe again, and I realized safety required action, not promises. The fear that had lived in Lauren's voice was contagious, but I couldn't let it infect the rest of us. I promised myself and Ethan in a whisper that I wouldn't let this go on for 3 months or for 3 days or for 1 more hour without fighting. I couldn't stop thinking about that note, "Dad, I'll be back by sunrise," so I didn't sleep. I sat in my truck until the sky lost its dark and watched the street. When a plain sedan pulled into the lot of a greasy spoon I knew from passing by, I followed it slow and quiet. My heart hammered like I was doing something wrong and right at the same time. I watched from across the street, hands on the steering wheel, while a kid slipped out the back door and ducked around to the alley. He came out wearing an apron and a cheap plastic name tag. He looked smaller than the apron wanted him to be. He moved through the dining room carrying trays heavy enough to throw most adults off balance. Guys in trucker caps barked orders. One of them leaned back and called, "Hey kid, make it quick." Ethan smiled and hustled like his life depended on getting each plate right. I pushed through the diner door and the air hit me, hot grease, coffee, cigarette smoke that must have clung to people with long nights. Heads turned, I walked up to the counter and didn't wait to be polite. "That's my son," I said, loud enough that people near us heard. "What the hell is he doing here? He's 13. The manager, a woman with a permanent scowl and an apron stained like a map, looked up slowly and put on a voice I recognized, blame shop calm. "He's 17, she said. "He has a permit." She slid a fake smile like a card trick. She insisted they checked IDs and that they followed the rules. Older man in a corner booth with a cap that smelled like diesel watched me and then shook his head. He waved me over like he was offering me a quiet truth. "Everyone here knows he's young," he said in a low voice, glancing at Ethan, who was bending over to pick up a dropped biscuit. "But the kid said he needed the cash, said it was for someone at home, said he couldn't tell us more." The man's voice had that small-town roughness, like he'd seen too much to be shocked. "We asked. Kid said it's life or nothing."
Lord,
I felt sick to my stomach. "Who gave him the pills?" I asked suddenly, because the white tablets and the sleepless nights made a picture I couldn't unsee. The man shrugged. "He comes in looking wiped and someone will slide him a little something. People think a kid can handle caffeine. He was always asking for extra hours." I went home and pushed into the house like it was a crime scene. Ethan sat on the stairs like he'd been waiting for someone to find him. He had flour on his shirt and a burn on his forearm from something hot. I pulled him into my arms without thinking. "Why did you leave me a note?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked at me like he was trying to be an adult and said, "I said I'd be back by sunrise. I can't sleep with the noise. I just wanted to help." His voice broke and I heard the tiny boy under the grown-up words. Lauren was in the kitchen when I came in. At first she tried to redirect, said I was overreacting, but her hands were shaking and the truth slotted out like a marble that had slipped from under a couch. She told me everything in bursts, words tripping over each other. "Insurance lapsed," she said. "You changed jobs. I found your test results." She named the file and I felt a weight drop into my chest. I panicked. The bills came. I didn't know what to do. She said she had sold things from Ethan's room and a few cash deals because she thought it would buy us time. "I thought if I kept working the math I could get us through until the insurance kicked in," she said. She told me she called the diner and asked if they had any night help who could use cash. "I told Mel," she started, then stopped like remembering a name she shouldn't say. She said she pushed because she thought it was better than bankruptcy, better than leaving us with nothing. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "I thought I could keep you calm until we had a plan. I didn't think he'd get hurt." Then she said the thing that broke me open. She handed Ethan pills to keep him awake during the shift. "They were caffeine tablets," she said. "I bought them at a gas station. I thought a couple of those and he'd manage. I didn't think." Her voice cracked and she couldn't finish. I wanted to rage. I wanted to turn her hands inside out and find the part of her that set us on fire. But looking at Ethan with flour on his shirt and a bruise that darkened like bad weather, the center of me went cold. I wanted to protect him, to be the one who fixed the damage. I also felt the truth hit like a punch. The fear about my health, the bills stacking, the gap in our insurance had turned my wife into a person who made decisions out of panic. We argued late into the morning, words sharp and guilty. "You had no right," I said. "You put him in danger." She answered like a woman who had been up nights bargaining with ghosts. "And you didn't tell me about the insurance gap," she said. "You didn't tell me about the tests." The house felt small and crowded with blame. When the loudness died down, we sat on the couch and tried to map a way forward. I called my doctor and scheduled urgent tests and appointments. I called the diner from my cell and asked to speak with the owner. The owner, Mel, apparently, said he believed Ethan was older and that the kid had signed papers. I told him I intended to call labor enforcement and make sure no other kid worked those hours. My voice was steady then because something else had arrived in me. A sharp need to fix what had been broken, starting with taking my son out of the dark places he'd been pushed into. We got to the ER with sirens and half my brain on fire and the other half numb. Ethan was pale like paper and he kept dry heaving until blood came up. The triage nurse took one look, her face folding into a map of worry, and took photos of the split lip, the bruises, the burns on his arms. She moved fast and never stopped talking to me like I needed steps. "We need labs now," she said. "This is serious." I stood by the stretcher and felt hollow, like I had been watching a movie and only now realized the actors were my family. The lab numbers landed like rocks. His hemoglobin was low, critically low, and they said he'd need observation and likely a transfusion if the numbers dipped. A social worker introduced himself as Brady and sat on a plastic chair across from me with a tablet full of forms. "We can get emergency aid," he said. He guided me through charity applications, Medicaid emergency coverage, programs that could help with immediate bills. The forms looked endless and important. Brady spoke gently but quick, like someone who had to carry people's emergencies all day. He told me what to expect, who would call, and where to sign. He told me he had seen worse, and worse didn't seem to surprise him anymore. Within hours, a tall man with a serious face and a badge came into the room. He introduced himself as Roman Hale, a CPS investigator. He said he needed to talk to us separately. "We follow up on anything that puts a child at risk," he said. I let him lead me down a hallway to a small interview room that smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. In there, he asked questions in a steady voice about who knew Ethan was working, where the money went, whether there were threats or abuse at home. I answered each question slowly and felt like the sentences were coming out of someone else's mouth. Roman told me he'd already been given some reports from the diner and that neighbors had called. He said it looked like Ethan had been working night shifts for about 2 months. He asked if I'd seen any signs. I thought of the mornings I'd shrugged off an open window or a wet spot on the floor, of how I'd explained away missing items with a laugh and a joke. I thought of my own tests I'd shoved in a drawer and not shown my wife. My silence had been loud. When Roman went to talk to Lauren, she broke down. In her interview, she told him she had tried to shield me from the truth because she thought I wouldn't accept treatment if I knew the cost. She said she panicked when she found abnormal results in my medical paperwork after I'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for another call. "I thought if Mark couldn't focus on treatment, he'd curl up and stop fighting," she said. She told Roman that she sold Ethan's things and sent him to the diner to bring home cash, that she gave him pills to keep him awake, because she thought a few sleepless nights were better than failing at everything. Hearing her say it out loud felt like hearing a confession that had been hiding in the walls of our house. After I left the interview room, I went to the bathroom and shut myself into a stall. I sat on the cold floor and let the things I had ignored come at me one by one. The nights I'd brushed off blood on a tissue, the times I'd told myself the bruise was from sports, the way I'd taken phone calls and tried to be brave about work while my own body complained with weight loss and strange pains. I had been in denial, and my denial had risked my son and our family. I let myself cry then, quiet, ugly sounds that felt like they had been stored up for years. Back in the hospital room, the doctors moved with a hard, efficient kindness. They scheduled PET scans and biopsies for me and used words like stage, urgent, and pathology that landed heavy in my ears. Dr. Camilla Hudson, who introduced herself with a brisk handshake and no wasted sympathy, was blunt. "We need to get results fast," she said. "If there's cancer, we have to know what stage and where. We'll plan treatment once we see the scans." Her eyes were sharp, but there was a steady thread of competence in what she said that steadied me as much as it scared me. Roman told me about the diner investigation while I tried to listen and sign the hospital's consent papers. He said Mel, who owned the diner, claimed he believed Ethan was older and had a permit. The man at the corner booth I'd talked to earlier told Roman something softer, that folks had known but had turned a blind eye because the kid seemed desperate. Roman's tone was a mix of professional and tired. "We need to make sure Ethan is safe now," he said, and that felt like something simple and huge at once. The day folded into night. Social work pushed paperwork and the nurses checked vitals. Brady arranged temporary housing assistance and a food program referral if we needed it. I signed whatever I had to sign and tried to breathe through a worry that kept multiplying. My denial had been a dangerous thing, but the hospital and these people were unspooling the mess into steps: medical scans, social support, legal checks. It was a start. And for the first time since this all began, I felt like someone else was carrying some of the weight. We walked out of the hospital with a stack of papers and a kind of exhausted determination. Brady from social work sat with me at a tiny table and ran through forms for emergency Medicaid, charity care, and drug assistance. He had a way of saying the worst things plainly and then offering the one or two ways forward. "Sign here, here, and here," he said. "We can apply for charity back pay to cover some of this, and there's an emergency Medicaid pathway for acute treatment." It felt like trying to read a map in a storm, but every signature was a small step toward keeping us afloat. Money became the hard edge of every decision. I talked with a financial advisor on the phone while lying awake and made a choice I hated. I cashed out part of my retirement early, $34,000 after penalties, to get treatment started fast. I watched numbers drain from an account I had pictured as untouchable for decades. It was terrifying and necessary all at once. Brady helped me set up payment plans for the rest and showed me community grants that could make up some difference. Every time I handed over another form, another card, I felt like we were trading pieces of our future for the present we needed. CPS moved quick. Roman Hale told me they'd set weekly check-ins and a hard rule that Ethan could not work anywhere. "We need to make sure he's not sent back into that environment," Roman said. "No work, no exceptions." It felt oddly good and awful, the relief that someone was watching and the shame that we had to be watched at all. Ethan started meeting with a counselor before I left the hospital. At first he answered questions in short sentences, but the counselor, who had a calm way of asking, got him to open up about the worst nights. Truckers grabbing his arm, a hot plate burned into his forearm, the weight of trays that made his back ache. Each detail was recorded for the case against the diner. Hearing him tell it out loud made my stomach hollow. Neighbors and the church became a surprise lifeline. A woman from our block set up a fundraiser on a community page and people started dropping money in. Within days, someone at our church organized a small collection and the total hit $9,500. People came by with casseroles and took Ethan to school when I needed to be at an appointment. A volunteer lugged groceries and told us not to worry about paying them back right away. I cried when an elderly couple handed me a bag of food and said, "We've been where you are." It was humbling and painful that we had to accept help, but the help took the edge off the immediate panic. The labor board showed up with questions and cameras. Inspectors walked through Mel's diner with clipboards and flashlights, documenting hazards that made my skin crawl: hot fryers without proper guards, slippery floors, exposed wiring near the prep counters. They took statements from workers and posted photos of burns and poor lighting where Ethan had carried heavy trays. Mel tried to say he believed Ethan was older, that the kid had a permit, but the board found enough violations to levy fines and order restitution for employing a minor in dangerous conditions. Mel's face when the inspector read the notice was a kind of stunned anger that didn't help him. The fines wouldn't bring back lost sleep or bruises, but they brought a small measure of accountability. In court filings, Ethan's statements about being grabbed and ordered around by truckers were part of a record that made the diner's defense weak. Our social worker and Roman coordinated witness statements. The legal steps were slow and ugly to sit through, but they mattered. We weren't just patching a leak, we were trying to stop anyone else from falling through the same hole. The city put a temporary safety plan in place that meant Ethan couldn't be around that diner during hours they had deemed unsafe. Life became a series of medical appointments and check-ins. I learned how to argue with billing departments and how to ask for charity when pride felt like a lead apron. Dr. Camilla Hudson scheduled my first round of scans and explained a treatment plan while Brady filed for drug assistance to help with the cost of my chemo. Every person I met seemed to be holding a part of the map forward. The counselor with a referral for trauma therapy, the neighbor coordinating rides, the hospital clerk who fought to get us covered by emergency aid. We paid a price in stress and in dollars, but the $9,500 collection, the grants Brady found, the $34,000 I took from retirement, and the labor board fines all combined into a bridge that kept us from collapsing that month. More than that, the social checks and counseling meant we weren't alone in fixing the damage. The house was quieter now in a way that was healing rather than hiding. Ethan slept more. He went to counseling and found, slowly, that he could talk about things he had swallowed. I kept telling myself the steps we were taking were for a long, hard climb back. We were starting that climb with people who, for once, were helping carry the load. Chemo started and it punched through my life like a physical force. The nausea hit first like a tide that wouldn't stop, and food became a negotiation I kept losing. I lost weight quickly and my clothes hung on me in a way that made me watch myself like someone else. The exhaustion was not just being tired. My body felt like it had been packed in cotton and every movement cost me. Through it all, the doctors said tiny things of progress and then bigger tests. But the build line on my patient portal kept growing like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Money became a puzzle with too many missing pieces. I rearranged everything we had into lists on the kitchen counter: mortgage, utilities, car, phone, credit. The mortgage and utilities went into the must-pay pile because without a roof and power, nothing else mattered. Credit accounts climbed like vines on the edges of the list, and we let some bills slide while we fought for help. I found a grim kind of math in the decisions, what we could save at the cost of something else, and the choices made me feel older than I was. CPS set rules that felt like both lifeline and leash. Roman Hale watched every step for a while, and then, when he saw us meeting appointments, getting counseling, and following the safety plan, he eased up. He reduced our check-ins to monthly visits and said it was because he trusted us to keep doing the hard work. I believed him, but I also felt the weight of proving ourselves again and again. Each meeting required lists, receipts, therapy notes, and proof that Ethan was not returning to the diner or working anywhere at night. Monica Fowler, our family therapist, came into our lives like someone with a plan. Monica Fowler, family therapist, taught us how to be honest in ways that were brutal and necessary. She gave us exercises that forced light into dark corners, write a list of secret fears, read them aloud, say the hard word, and then say the truth that counters it. We did roleplay where I had to say out loud what I had been terrified to admit. Lauren had to say what she'd done and why. We all sat with trembling voices and then tried to be steady after. The house felt raw but less poisonous after we started those exercises. One night, Lauren Talia wrote Ethan a letter. Talia, my wife Lauren, sat with a pen and paper and handshook through every line. She apologized in a way that made me want to cry and hate her at the same time. She said sorry for stealing his childhood by selling his things and making him work. She said she had been scared and had done things she could not take back. Ethan read the letter in therapy before reading it to us at home. The way she signed it was quiet and small, like someone trying to fit the weight of a confession into 2 words. Ethan asked questions in therapy that cut straight to the bone. "Is it okay to be angry at her?" he whispered to Monica. The counselor nodded and said every feeling is fair. That answer let Ethan name ugly things without fearing he'd be punished for them. He had anger, betrayal, fear, guilt, and still a desire to protect his mom. Watching him sort those feelings made me proud and crushed me at once. I learned that healing didn't mean making the hurt vanish. It meant teaching a 13-year-old how to carry his heart without breaking. We prepared the impact statement for the labor hearing together. Adonis, no, Ethan wrote down the nights he was awake, how his head thumped in class, how he vomited blood and felt dizzy, the hands that grabbed his arm in the kitchen, and the heavy plates that felt like weights at his shoulders. We practiced reading it aloud until his voice stopped shaking. Hearing him speak the facts with steady breath was a small kind of justice. It didn't erase the memories, but it put them on paper and into the record where they could matter. Life found a new rhythm, slow and careful. I managed chemo appointments around therapy and school meetings, and we learned to ask for help without shame. Neighbors dropped off food, Roman checked in by text, and Monica pushed us gently through exercises that made honesty feel like medicine. The bills kept coming, and we kept answering them, sometimes by borrowing, sometimes by asking for grants. The house began to feel less like a place of secrets, and more like a place where we were learning to tell the truth and then clean up the mess together. The courtroom smelled like paper and cheap coffee and the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heart. I sat with Ethan and Lauren on the pew and watched as Mel stood there trying to look small and big at the same time. The judge read the fines, nearly $22,500 in penalties and restitution. "This will not undo what happened," the judge said, and the words landed like they were meant to be both true and final. Mel agreed to pay and to make changes at the diner, but the money mattered as much as a bandage on a broken bone. I felt relief and anger mix in my chest. Roman's last couple of visits felt different than before. He walked the house with the easy authority of someone who had seen 1,000 messes and a few miracles. He put his folder down and looked at us, me, Ethan, Lauren, and said, "You've done the work. I'm recommending we close the file with monthly check-ins for a while. Many families fall apart under this kind of pressure. You started holding together instead." Hearing him say that made something inside me unclench. It didn't erase what happened, but it meant someone trusted we could keep ourselves safe. The hospital gave us the kind of news I had been holding my breath for. After months of scans, chemo, and then surgery, the pathology report said the best thing possible: clean surgical margins and no lymph node involvement. Dr. Camilla Hudson came in with a soft smile that had learned to be careful with hope. "We got all of the tumor," she said plainly. "And your nodes are clear. We'll keep preventive chemo for a while, but this is the outcome we work toward." I remember sitting in the chair by the bed and feeling like the air in the room had more space in it. I wanted to stand up and shout, and then cry into my hands like the tired man I was. Surgery removed the tumor and took out a few lymph nodes for testing. Recovery was slow. The incision hurt in ways that made me swear quietly and then laugh because I could. The chemo kept coming, preventive now, the kind that was meant to keep things from returning. Side effects stayed with me: fatigue, days where the world felt thin, but there were also days where I felt more like myself, a man whose body would fight and whose family would wait. Money, always money, shifted into a new, quieter fight. The grants, charity care, community emergency fund, and that $9,500 our neighbors raised cut the debt down enough to be manageable. We set up a payment plan that didn't make me consider selling anything else. I had cashed out retirement and lost the expected safety net for the years ahead, but the immediate cliff vanished. I had also lost a promotion I'd been up for at work, a chance that would have meant more stability. I kept my job on FMLA, which let me have health insurance and some breathing room. It wasn't what I'd expected, but it was enough to keep the lights on while I healed. Small recoveries marked our days in ways big things couldn't. Someone bought back Ethan's signed baseball and left it on our porch with a note: "For the kid who deserves to play." When he found it, he sat on the swing in the backyard and hugged it like a person. Neighbors still dropped meals by the door and stayed long enough to trade a joke or a hard truth. A woman from church brought over a binder she'd made, resources, phone numbers, a list of people who'd helped her family once. Those acts felt like stitches being sewn into our life, slow and careful. Therapy continued. Monica Fowler's exercises kept us honest. Ethan went to counseling for months and then weekly check-ins. He started sleeping again, and most nights his laugh returned, quiet at first, then louder. He wrote his closing impact statement and read it aloud in the hearing room without crying. That was a victory I couldn't have imagined when we began. Lauren sat with me one night and put her hand over mine like she was asking for permission to stay. "I thought hiding it would protect you," she said. "I was terrified." I didn't forgive her in a single breath, but I heard fear that had made her do cruel things. We kept working on the hard stuff: honesty, boundaries, bills, and I let space for both anger and an attempt at repair. Roman's recommendation to close the case felt official. The monthly check-ins kept us on track without the constant scrutiny. We were still scarred and still paying more than I wanted, but for the first time in a long time, the house felt like it belonged to us again. There were new rules on the fridge: appointments, school meetings, truthful notes, and the old secrets were out where they could be seen and healed. We could breathe again, small and uneven, but ours. That, in the end, was what I had wanted from the start: a family that kept trying together. We sat around the kitchen table and taped a poster to the wall with our new rules written in big letters so nobody could ignore them. Ethan, my son, was listed first. His job was to be a kid and go to school, no work, no nights, no more unpaid debts. Lauren, my wife, and I wrote that every financial decision would be shared, no more secret sales, no more hiding bills, because secrets had almost ruined us. I added the thing I needed most. I promised to tell someone right away if I felt sick, to stop protecting others by hiding my pain. The poster looked simple and a little desperate, but putting it on the wall turned it into a promise we could point to when fear came back. The house felt different after that night. Honesty replaced the hush that had lived in corners, and even when the truth hurt, it did less damage than the lies had. We still owed money, and the payment plan felt like a leash on our future, but payments no longer came with a side of shame because we faced them together. We kept lists on the fridge now, appointments, bills, who called to offer help, and I learned to answer with the simple line, "We're getting help, thank you," instead of trying to explain everything all at once. The small acts of order saved us through days when chemo wore me thin and Lauren's hands still trembled as she opened envelopes. Ethan started going to a support group for kids with sick parents, and it wasn't what I expected, it was better. He met boys and girls who had lost sleep at the hospital, whose parents were tired or scared in the same way ours had been. For the first time since all of this began, he came home and told me about someone who understood his jokes about vomiting blood without flinching. He learned language for the strange feelings he had, anger that didn't mean he loved his mom any less, guilt that didn't have to be his forever. He came back from those meetings quieter, steadier. I think he liked that other kids didn't make him explain himself, they just listened. Brady, the social worker who had been a steady voice in the ER, kept cutting through red tape like he had scissors for paper. He enrolled us in food delivery programs, set us up with utility assistance, and checked on whether we needed extra help with transport to appointments. When the grant money ran thin, Brady walked me through who to call and what to say. The town's small kindnesses kept arriving. A neighbor buying back Ethan's signed baseball, a church group arranging a grocery drop, someone mowing our lawn without asking for thanks. Those gestures were not grand, but they were human and steady mattered more than flashy help. We still had hospital bills and a long recovery ahead. I lost the promotion I'd hoped for and my retirement nest egg had been cut into, and money kept a dull ache under every day. But we learned how to speak the truth about what we had. We told caseworkers our schedules, we showed receipts, we kept our appointments, and Roman, the CPS investigator, slowly nodded as he closed our case with monthly check-ins. He told us without sugar that many families break under this kind of pressure. We had not become whole, but we had learned to hold the family together, and that was something he thought mattered. At night, lying in my hospital bed, I watched the small life we'd rebuilt. Ethan sat in the chair with homework and a snack beside him, his feet dangling like he was still a little boy even when he stood taller than I liked to admit. Lauren sat on the end of the bed and arranged my medications like a nurse who also happened to be my wife. We fell into a quiet rhythm of checking in, singing soft jokes, and reading text reminders for appointments. Those routine acts felt like stitches, mending a fabric that had been ripped open. Honesty had become the foundation of what we were building. It replaced the brittle fear that had sent Ethan into dangerous shifts and turned my wife's panic into secret deals. We still fought, still had angry nights, and still stared down bills that wouldn't budge. But we agreed to tell the truth first, and then we figured out the rest together. We survived being exploited, I survived sickness, and we survived carrying too much alone. We were broke and battered, and we were together, messy, exhausted, and finally honest. And that truth felt like the one thing money couldn't buy back. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your thoughts.